I'm Carolyn and I work for the School Age Speech and Language Therapy Service. Just sort of wanted to talk a little bit about myself so you can understand where I'm coming from, where in concern for behaviour as communication. Before I was a speech and language therapist, I was a secondary school teacher for 25 years, teaching humanities and modern foreign languages. And during that time, I have run a centre for students with physical disabilities. I have worked for Autism Outreach. I have been a SENCO, among other things. And also I actually I'm a volunteer in my own local community, working in a youth group on Friday nights for 10 to 18-year-olds. So I've sort of got quite a bit of experience across age groups that we're going to talk about today. So what we're going to do today is talk about behaviour as communication, and then talk about some simple support strategies that you can use that will help all young people with their communication, whether they have additional needs or not. This can help your groups to be more accessible to all. Can I have the next slide, please? All behaviour is communication, and I think the majority of us who work with young people do actually understand that. But I just wanted to go through have a little look at the different ages and stages of communication, so you can see how much we all communicate through our behaviours. So, for example, very, very young children, you will have parents who are very, very skilled at knowing the difference when their child is crying between a cry for "I'm in pain" or "I'm hungry" or "I need changing." These behaviours are occurring without language, and these behaviours are showing us an unmet need. If we look at slightly older children, those primary age group, you might see smiling to show happiness, crying to show distress, throwing a tantrum when overwhelmed, and withdrawal. And then with the tweens and teens, I have a lot of experience with teens and tweens. We have the rolling of the eyes, the cold shoulder, the death stare, outbursts or swearing, and sometimes withdrawal as well. So we're sort of looking at lots of different parts of communication and communication without language. The crucial point here is that we recognise these as communication, and then we build in certain strategies that will benefit all. Next slide, please. So further on for that, we can sort of break down behaviours into three major types. And I want you to really think about some of the young people that you might see in your groups. So we have positive behaviours, which we've talked about: the smiling, the laughing, the hugging. These communicate generally happiness, comfort, affection, being comfortable within a group. We then have some of these behaviours that challenge, so the tantrums, the hitting, the biting. These can, of course, signal frustration, fear, or a need for attention. And we've also got to think about, it's interesting with tantrums, we are generally quite good at seeing with younger children what a tantrum is about. But we've also got to remember that with older children, so those teenagers as well, if they're having what you would consider a tantrum, that actually might be communicating to you that they have an unmet need as well. So we're not always so sympathetic to those older children. So I want you to think about that within your groups. Are you quite sympathetic to someone having a bit of a tantrum? And just thinking about, is there they're communicating something, what is the need behind that communication? We also have the third sort of behaviour is withdrawal. So if a child becomes withdrawn, it might be that they're feeling overwhelmed, anxious, or sad. So we're going to look at some ways in which we can support all young people. Next slide, please. Okay. So we're going to look at these strategies that can help everyone's communication. Some of these suggestions you're probably already doing naturally, but it's always helpful to have a reminder of what we do and why we do it. And once you understand the why, it's much easier to use these strategies to support our young people. Next slide, please. Right. All young people have different communication styles. Some are really good listeners, some are not. Some need to see what they have to do rather than hear what they have to do. Some will need to be shown what to do or have someone model the task and then give time to practice. Getting to know the children or the young people's best communication styles is really, really important. And then you can differentiate your task to make sure that you're covering a learning style. So for example, I'm going to give you a very simple example for me. I find it really hard to listen and be told what to do. I really need to be shown what to do. So to give you a very clear example, if I have tech issues, I will ask my husband, can you show me how to do this? Now, if he sort of takes over the use of the mouse, I get quite cross because I don't want him to do it for me. I want him to talk me through it stage by stage. He can show me how to do it once, and then he needs to talk through stage by stage. So that's just a very simple example of how people learn differently. One thing that will benefit all young people is visuals. Okay. Every single young person that you have in your groups will benefit from visuals, except for a child with a visual impairment. So visuals can be lots of different things, and we're going to go into the next slide, please, to have a little chat about that. So these are just some simple visuals that you can use and that can be downloaded from the internet to help young people see what your timetable is for any of your groups. So all young, so on the left-hand side, we have lots of different activities. So I've based this on a group for younger children, but you can get all of these visuals for older children as well. And if you have a schedule for today or a schedule for this evening's activities or a visual schedule, it really, really helps young people. You can display them in strips for what you're going to do that session. Now, some people have said, oh, they look like they're for younger people, but you can never underestimate how much older children and teenagers actually really like a visual timetable of what's going to happen in that evening, especially young people who have experienced trauma or who have autistic spectrum disorders or who have anxiety, because they have real difficulties predicting what's going to happen next. And when they can't predict what's going to happen next, they become more and more anxious. So if you have a visual timetable of what's going to go on in your group or what a young person needs to do within a particular task, that can be really, really helpful to not only show young people what's going to go on in the group, but also to reduce anxiety. I've seen some fantastic practice where at the start of a youth group, they will have someone come out the front and they will pick out all the activities that are going to happen today, and then they put them in order, and they usually pick someone, a young child or a young person who maybe is a bit anxious about being at the group, and so getting them involved so they really understand what's going to happen within the group. Other types of visuals are actually you acting out what you need to do. Also using videos, that can be quite helpful. Having pictures of instructions, any of those things can really help everyone within the group, because, and it will also help young people's independence, because they won't all be asking you, what do I do next? What do I do next? What do I do next? It can be, oh, okay, I've got a visual here, I can follow a visual. So visuals are absolutely crucial to be using within your groups. And it also benefits, if you remember, we were talking about different learning styles. Try and use more than one, but I would always say that visuals will support the majority of young people and children. Next slide, please. This next one is about listening. This is listening as a real strategy. Listening and watching are key aspects of how we support young people. And this has two parts, engagement and reflection. So for engagement, to let a young person know that they are important, you sort of show you're listening by making eye contact, nodding, responding appropriately. For a young person, so a primary age student, getting down to their level is really important. It shows that you're making a real effort. For an older child, such as teenager, actually giving them the space and giving them your complete focus is the real winner when it comes to listening. That sort of means that basically you are giving them the space and you're giving them your full attention when they're trying to communicate something to you. Some people might want to go to a quieter place to talk. That can be quite useful as well. But sort of judging each young person as what their needs are and going, okay, I can't quite hear you in here. There's a lot going on. Let's just stand just outside the room to be able to talk to someone and to make sure that you're listening. And then having this reflective listening, as in summarizing what the young person has said. So once you have listened, you can then summarize what they have said. That has a twofold advantages. That means that basically, one, they have seen that you are really listening to them. And the second thing it does is it builds trust and empathy. And they're the sort of trusting relationships we want in our groups. Yeah, so active listening shows the young person that they're important and being listening to. It's a key way of building rapport between the adults and the young people. Could I have the next slide, please? This next strategy is called positive narration, relating to the young person. Narration can be really, really effective, especially for younger children who maybe do not have the language. So it's about building language for a young person who maybe doesn't have the emotional language, doesn't quite know what to say. So, for example, for a toddler who does not yet have language, and they can't tell you what's wrong, you can narrate their behaviors and say, I can see that you're really upset and you're sad because you're crying. So what this does is it actually helps them increase their language, as well as, once again, giving them that empathy and building that trust. With teenagers, you may not want to go to that sort of level, but you might be able to say to them, for a teenager, it might be, I can see this has caused you real concern or worry. I can see this has really worried you. So you're actually acknowledging that there is an issue. You're acknowledging that they're trying to communicate something to you. And so that can be quite helpful, once again, to get to lower their anxiety, because they have seen that you have noticed. This means that you are relating to them, and that they are going to see that you're ready to listen and that you're ready to hear it from their point of view. Can I have the next slide, please? Now, this one is one of my favorite strategies to talk about. This is understanding when to talk and when to listen. If a child is in distress or upset, their brain is generally overloaded, and so they will not be able to take in any more information. They're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. And so they're not actually listening to you. So talking to them at a moment when they are overwhelmed can be very, very ineffective, especially because they're in that fight, flight, or freeze mode. Their decision-making and their understanding of action and consequence is actually switched off. So we need to use less language, not more. Once again, a short narration can help. I can see you're upset. I can see you're worried. I can see that that has upset you. One thing you can do to get their language back and get them to once again come out of that fight, flight, or freeze mode is you can give them what's called an ordering task. Now, an ordering task is just putting anything in order. So it helps them to re-engage that decision-making part of the brain. So that can be very simply things like, oh, can you sort out all of the footballs and the rugby balls? Because you're asked them to do an ordering task. Or can you sort out all the cups into height order? Can you sort out all of the equipment? I need all of the dirty cups in this corner and all the clean cups in this corner. Putting equipment away can be helpful because they've got to re-engage that front part of their brain. So it is about meeting the child where they are, doing a short narration, and then not trying to deal with the particular incident until they are ready and they've re-engaged that front part of their brain. Once their decision-making part of their brain has re-engaged, then you can start to talk about what's gone on. Okay. Next slide, please. This one is use less language, not more. What this means is when a child is maybe in distress, is worried, use less language, not more. Don't try and give lots of big explanations. The one thing I would say is don't use open-ended questions like, oh, what would you like to do? Because that's too big for a young person. Instead, you could say, oh, we can go and sit on the beanbag, or we can go into the kitchen. What would you like to do? They don't even have to use language. They can just point to your hand. Next slide, please. Positive reinforcement. This one is sort of self-explanatory. Catch young people doing the right thing and comment on it. So saying, I really liked how you helped Susie. That was very kind of you. That is quite powerful if you're using this with young people. Next slide, please. Very, very important. Have clear expectations. And once again, using visuals to show them what your expectations are. And have clear consequences. And make sure everyone understands those consequences as well. Next slide, please. And of course, as leaders in groups and volunteers, modeling appropriate behaviour can really help. I think you can miss the next slide because that was just a summary of all of the 8 points. But if anyone has got any more questions, please put questions in the chat, and you're going to join you can join the groups later on if you have any more questions or comments. Thank you very much.